Okay, so today we are doing my end of week wrap up reading vlog for the third week of July. For those of you who don't know, my end of week wrap up reading vlog is where I take the chance to discuss with you guys what I have been reading all week. And this week, I have quite a few books to discuss with you guys, so I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to start with this book, The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. So, originally on my July TBR, this book was placed to be read from Monday to Friday. There are two reasons for this. One, it is an adult fantasy, and so I wanted to take my time with this book because I have rushed through adult fantasies before and I haven't enjoyed them as much, and it hasn't allowed me to really, immerse myself in the story. Also, two, it is an absolute chunker. It is really close to being a tome and a half. For those of you who don't know, a tome is 500 pages, so this book, while not 750 pages, is very close to being 750 pages. But I got about 4 chapters in to this book before realizing that I just could not continue on with this book. There are a few different reasons. The biggest reason is I wasn't enjoying the plot, but there are other reasons as well. There's a ton of swearing in this book. Now, I don't mind swearing being used in a book provided there is a reason, but if you're just going to have your characters swearing a lot just for the sake of swearing, for me it not only doesn't develop or enhance the book in any way, but if anything, it kind of distracts me from the book, so I did not enjoy that. The second reason why I DNF'd this book is because I wasn't enjoying the magic system itself. It was rather boring to me. I know there are a lot of fans of the Lightbringer series, which this is book one of, so this is just my own personal opinion. And my third reason is that there was a disgusting moment towards the time where I was about to DNF it, involving the magic system and, brace yourself, urine. And that was the final mark for me. It's one thing to read an adult book, it's another thing to get immersed in the writing style of adult literature because it is very different to young adult literature. It's another thing to have all this swearing that's unnecessary, but quite another altogether if you're going to involve something like urine in a magic system. I just found it absolutely disgusting, and that's just me personally. I couldn't read this any longer, so I ended up DNFing it. But because I DNF'd that book, and because that book was scheduled to take me from Monday all the way through to Friday, I needed to come up with a replacement. I ended up coming up with 2 replacements, and I don't regret either for a second, making me feel much less guilty about DNFing The Black Prism. The first book that I replaced it with was this book, The Devil Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger. So, this book is the original source material that was eventually developed into the film that you may have seen or even heard of, starring Meryl Streep, Anne Hathaway, and Emily Blunt and Stanley Tucci. I had seen that film. Not only had I seen it, I saw it at the cinemas when it first came out, but I loved it so much that I've seen the film so many times, and I just so happened to have this book on me. I must have bought it last year because I didn't even remember that I had this book, but once I saw it, I just thought, ugh, I gotta read this because I love the film so much. The book is even better. So quickly explain the premise of the book. Basically, the story, the book and the film both revolve around this character, Andrea Sachs, who prefers to be called Andy, who has aspirations to become a journalist at the New York Times, but she really has a limited options for work at the moment and just needs to gain some experience, so she ends up getting a role to be a personal assistant to Miranda Priestley, who is the um, who is the chief executive officer or something like that. She is the boss for a fashion magazine known as Runway. Runway magazine is the most popular fashion magazine, at least in America, but it's also incredibly popular around the world, and Miranda Priestly is very well known. The reason why the book is called The Devil Wears Prada is because Miranda is the most devilish boss that you will come across, setting incredibly high standards of her personal assistants, and most of the time creating improbable or next to impossible tasks to be achieved. And that's what kept me on the edge of my seat with the film as well as reading the book. I just couldn't wait to see what impossible task Miranda was going to come up with next. One thing I really appreciate about this book, despite the fact that Miranda Priestly is the villain, is that she is a headstrong woman who has risen to the top of her profession, and she is extremely successful. So I really do appreciate that side of it. And as much as she is portrayed as a villain in that light, I think it's amazing that she's gotten as far as she has, and I'm a massive feminist, so for me, that was a big deal. But one of the biggest differences between the book and the film is that the film more revolves around, it's 95% of the film revolves around Andrea's time at Runway. The book kind of splits it up to 50% is her time at Runway and 50% is her home life. And there are a lot of things that going on in her home life, and so we get to know all of that a lot more. The book does differ from the film, and I only found out, oh, the lighting keeps changing, I do apologize. I only found out, I think it was last night, that whoever ended up buying the script for the film, the script was written when the book was only 3/4 finished. So it was, the idea of this premise was so good that they didn't even wait for the book to be done before they started writing the script. And so we have two different stories, and we have two very different endings. The ending for this book is much less subtle than the film. The film's ending is very subtle. But I really enjoyed this book. It is a YA, even though it could be seen as an adult book, but I'm going to call it a YA because that's what I think it is. A YA contemporary, and I gave it 5 stars. It was absolutely amazing. So this carried me through until Friday. So I finished it on Thursday, I should say. And while I was reading that book, I was also reading this book alongside it, the third and final, in my opinion, because I'm not counting the 4th book released this year, the third and final book in the Hunger Games series, Mockingjay. Unlike The Devil Wears Prada, this book was a complete and total disappointment to me because I loved the first book, The Hunger Games, so much, and the second book was okay, but then there was a twist that occurred at the end of the second book that made me really anxious going into this one because I didn't know how it was going to go. On a personal enjoyment level alone, I did not like this book at all. From a constructive criticism, objective view of the target audience that this book is being written for, I think there are some pros and there are some cons. The book is well written. It has an easy to read writing style, and it does place you into the mindset, particularly the fears of our protagonist really well, as all of the books do. I do think Susan Collins is a really good writer. I just think she made some horrible decisions for a series that was doing so well and then suddenly end up taking a nosedive, which I think a lot of people agree that they don't like Mockingjay. I ended up doing a review of the entire Hunger Games series, and it's either out now or it's going to be out really soon, so you can check my playlist under reviews for those where I review the entire series as a whole. But I ended up giving this book 2 stars because I went into it not wanting to rate it on my own personal feelings. I went into it trying to be objective and looking at the target audience. But to look at the target audience, you have to look at the series as a whole, because that is the target audience. It is the 3rd book in the series, and it was incredibly disappointing, an incredibly disappointing way to wrap up the series. So I rated it 2 stars. If you've read this book, let me know if you rated it differently, if you've read it and rated it, and what your thoughts were. But I was incredibly disappointed with this book. So alongside Devil Wears Prada, I had to find another book to last me for the remainder of the week, and I ended up choosing this book, Rowan of Rin by Emily Rodda. This is a middle grade fantasy book, and when I was really, really, really little, like middle grade age basically, my mum bought me this book because she knew that I liked fantasy, and I struggled to get through it. This is actually a different version to the one that my mum got me. My mum got me the original version because the book had only just come out at the time, so this looks very different to that one, but the book is exactly the same. So basically the premise of this book is that it revolves around a boy whose name is Rowan, who has grown up in what sounds like a tribe, very much sounds like a tribal setting, a tribe called Rin, and the tribe wakes up one day to find that the water from the dam or the stream that they collect their water from has dried up, and the only way to remedy this is to travel to the top of the mountain to fix whatever has happened. There have been long time rumors floating around the tribe that there is a dragon at the top of the mountain. The adults don't believe it, but the children certainly live in fear of it, and it's a rumor that's been going around for a long time. So ultimately, and this is still in the first chapter, so it's not a spoiler, Rowan and a couple of older people in the tribe go to visit a wise woman who has been labeled as a witch because they believe she has some sorcery within her as to what they should do. And she ends up, saying all these things that don't make the adults that are accompanying Rowan, they're not really convinced with what she's trying to tell them. Eventually she ends up throwing a stick at one of the adults, who moves out the way, and it hits Rowan, and the adults end up leaving, and Rowan takes the stick with him. It's good that he did, because the stick is no ordinary stick, and because this is a middle grade book, it is a middle grade pamphlet, because it's not even 250 pages long. I think it's like 188 pages or something, or maybe even less. It's a really quick read. I read it all, well, I could have read it all in one day. I opted to read it over the course of 2 days. Yeah, the stick is not what it seems, and this sets up an adventure for Rowan and a number of other tribes people to go to the top of the mountain to fix the situation. I don't like traveling/questing tropes, but oh my gosh. Emily Rodda, I bow down to you because you have found a way. I never thought anyone would. You have found a way to write a traveling/questing trope story that I love. And there are 2 big reasons why I love it. One, it's a short story, so they have to travel to the top of the mountain quickly because there's not enough pages to make it last forever. But 2, there are obstacles that the tribe that are traveling to the top of the mountain come into along the way, and yeah, and they have to work out how to get past these obstacles, and it is done really well. There is a massive thing I could say, but it would be a spoiler, so I'm not going to say it here, but I definitely recommend it, especially because it's a short read, it's a middle grade, so it shouldn't take you long to get through this book, and it didn't take me long to get through it either. I love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. Now, I do want to premise that rating by letting you guys know that I'm not going to rate a middle grade book 5 stars purely because it is a middle grade. I am going to judge a middle grade book the exact same way I would judge any type of book, because to me, every book is a book, so I'm going to judge it the exact same way. Some people judge middle grade a lot more nicely than they do young adult or adult books, but to me, I judge them all equally. If a middle grade book is really amazing and I really enjoy myself, it's gonna get 5 stars, and that's what happened. And the fact that I have a traveling/questing trope book that received 5 stars, had you told me this a week ago, I would have said you're crazy, because I don't like that trope at all. But Emily Rodda did it so well. I'm not going to be continuing on with the series, but I read this book for the sake of nostalgia because, as I said, my mum did buy me this when I was of the age of middle grade. We don't use the terminology middle grade for school here in Australia, but when I was of that age that middle grade is, She bought me this book and I DNF'd it many times because the beginning was really tough for me to get through because it wasn't enjoyable. And I still feel the same way as an adult. I didn't like the first chapter, but pushing through was so worth it because it's such a good read. So I highly recommend it and I gave it 5 stars. So, the next book that was on my TBR is a book that I've not finished yet. I'm still reading it at the moment. And is it where I'm up to? Yes, it is. And that is this book, Captive Prince by C.S. Packard. Okay, so I have been telling you guys for a couple of reading vlogs now that I will finally be able to pronounce the surname of this author by the time we get to this video. I knew it was either Packard or Passat, and it is Packard. So, yay, I'm finally pronouncing it correctly. This book is categorized as an adult male fantasy. So basically therefore this book goes under the LGBTIQ plus category because the central relationship or dynamic, if you will, is male-male rather than male-female. So I really appreciate that. I've been saying for a while that my channel has very much been underrepresenting the LGBTIQ plus community, and this is something that I need to work on. Okay, let's talk. So I've got 2 bookmarks and I do apologize, but this is where I'm up to, and where the second bookmark is where I hope to get up to today, and I'll be finishing it tomorrow. I am 191 pages in. Let's talk about this book, because this book has been shocking me left, right, and center because it's not what I thought it would be at all. So basically, from what I've read so far, the spoiler-free premise is that this book revolves around Damon, who is a pleasure slave for a rival kingdom. So basically what we learn in chapter 1 is that Damon, who has a longer, more regal sound name like Damanius or something like that, but it's shortened to Damon for what he does now. He was the former prince of a rival castle, but owing to the fact that something went down, he got punished for that and was made by the king, his father, he was made a pleasure slave. He ends up being shipped off to a rivaling kingdom who fortunately doesn't know that he was a former prince, and he's basically forced into submission to be a sex pleasure slave for anyone that's going to end up having him as their, what C.S. Packard refers to as, toy. The prince of that kingdom ends up choosing Damon. Now, this book, I thought that this book was going to be a lovely little, sex slave ends up being with the prince, they fall in love and live happily ever after, and boy was I completely wrong about that. This book explores how these pleasure slaves are being treated, and a heads up and multiple trigger warnings, they are not treated well at all. So I am going to finish this book, and depending upon how the book ends, I'll see if I continue on with the series, but I just want you to know that I went into this book thinking that it was going to be a sexy book, I guess, and then, the prince and the pleasure slave will live happily ever after by the end because they fall in love. But no. Also, at the moment, I can't tell why it's a fantasy, aside from the fact that it's set in a kingdom. I have not seen any fantastical/magical elements at all. No magic systems that I see anywhere, so I don't see how it is a fantasy. I would call it a high fantasy because it is set in an area that is not of this world, so I would, for that reason, call it a high fantasy, but there's no magic, and that's kind of disappointing me a bit. But it has been a shocker and a half to read because I was not expecting this to be what the book was about, so I will definitely finish it. I'm not that far away from the end, and I think C.S. Packard has a lot of guts to write what she wrote in this book. But, provided that slavery or I guess, sexual assault of pleasure slaves doesn't trigger you, then I would recommend reading the book because it's very different to anything I've read before. Yeah, we'll see how we go, and I'll let you know by my midweek vlog next week how we go with this one. So let's move on to what I am going to be reading for next week, which is week 4. Oh my goodness, week 4 of July. So, obviously I'm going to be continuing on with Captive Prince. I will finish this tomorrow, Monday. And then I'm going to be picking up a book that I have somehow managed to ignore for a very long time, despite the fact that I love its series. But now I'm going to finally be reading it. So, that book is this book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So, I love Harry Potter. In fact, I have it right here. And I've always loved it ever since I first read it. I've reread it many times, and I reread it recently this year in May. I started and then I finished it in June last month, and I loved it so much that, like I do every time I read the series, I want to read more Harry Potter. But, so when I found out that this was being released, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, I was really excited because I thought, yay, we're going to read more Harry. And then I found out that it is not a book. While it is bound to look like a book, it's not a book. In fact, it is a manuscript. It is a script like you would see for a play or a TV show. And that really turned me off from wanting to read it because all of the books in the series are novels. They're standard books. They're not written as scripts. However, I am desperate to read me some more Harry Potter, so I decided to bite the bullet, pick this up, and see how I go. I am yet to come across anyone who fell in love with the Harry Potter series as a whole who liked this book, so that has me going in with quite a few anxieties, but we'll see how we go. Yeah, so I'll be reading this, I believe, Monday to Wednesday, I think? Something like that, anyway. So, there we go. Following that book, I'm going to be reading another one, and I want to premise that the one that I'm about to show you before I show it to you. So basically, I have been having a few discussions with my mum, who is really loving the fact that I've gotten back into reading. As I have been saying for a while now, when I was younger and when I lived at home with my mum, most of my days when I was at home were filled with reading. I had my fold-up chair sat and propped up against the window. The window's open so the light could shine in, and I was reading. I would get up, do my morning chores, and then once all that was done, I would be sitting reading until dinner time, when I was forced to put my book down because our family was very much a everyone sits together when you have dinner type family. So I was forced to put the book down, go and shovel down dinner as quickly as I could so I could get back to whatever I was reading. I loved it so much, and my mum always appreciated that I did. So I was talking to her recently about how I'd gotten back into reading and how I've read so many books. I've read more than 55 books so far. Oh my gosh, like, it's amazing. It's more than I have before. But anyway, so my mum was rather blown away by this, and we started talking about the books that she was reading, and then we ultimately decided that we are going to do a different type of buddy reading. So basically what we are going to do for our July buddy read, and we have plans to buddy read every month from now on, so I'm very excited about that. But it's a different type of buddy read. Generally speaking, when people get together and read a buddy read, and then they come together to form a buddy reading club and they buddy read together, they are buddy reading the same book. Not with me and my mum. We're doing something completely different. I am going to buddy read with her a book that she has read, and she is going to read a book that I have read. And speaking of Harry Potter, I'm very excited to say that my mum is going to be reading the first book in the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Now, I'm Australian, so in Australia we have the English version of the book Philosophers as opposed to the American version Sorcerers. And I'm very excited. So, Mum, if you're watching this, I can't wait to talk to you about it. I'm really, really excited. But for my end, I'm going to be reading a book that she has read, which has become very popular because it's part of Reese Witherspoon's book club books or favourite books, something like that. And it is called From Scratch by Tembi Locke. So I know nothing about this book other than the fact that it is a biography. It is 305 pages long, which makes it a half tome. I have no idea what I'm getting into, and we will see what happens when I do get into it. Now, my mum has already told me that she was incredibly disappointed with a film that's not this, so I will leave that for next time. She was incredibly disappointed with a book that was adapted into a film. We'll talk about that for my next buddy read. Yeah, so a memoir of love, Sicily, and finding home. And according to Reese Witherspoon, it says, this book gives me all the feels. Tembi Locke, who is the author, learns to heal in the most beautiful way through the support of 3 generous women. And yes, there's Italian food. So yeah, now one of the things that I was telling my mum recently when I was telling her that the book had arrived was I'm really grateful that we're doing the book club for many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that I never would have picked this book up on my own. So having this buddy read book club with my mum has me reading books that I wouldn't normally read otherwise. So I very much appreciate that, Mum. Hi, big shout out to you in case you're watching. And I can't wait to see what you think about Harry Potter. And I can't wait to talk to you about my thoughts of this book that I know you've been waiting a while, but I'm finally going to get to it. So let's go over what we've been talking about this week, because we've been talking about quite a lot of books. This is the most books I've spoken about in any reading vlog ever. So let's quickly do this. I started my week off trying to read The Black Prison by Brent Weeks, ended up DNFing it because of too much foul language that wasn't necessary, a magic system that I wasn't appreciating, and including urine in the magic system. Ew. So DNF'd. Replaced that with The Devil Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger, gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. If you've seen the film, still read the book. The book is better. Then I went on to finish off The Hunger Games' 3rd book in the series, Mockingjay. Was very much disappointed and gave it 2 stars. Then I picked up, for nostalgia's sake, Emily Rodda's Rowan of Rin, which is a middle grade fantasy book, and read it over the course of 2 days, but it's a very, very, very short book. Gave it 5 stars, despite the fact that it has a traveling / questing trope. It was done really exceptionally well. 5 stars, really appreciated it. I am 3/4 of the way through Captive Prince. It is a shocker and a half. I was not expecting it to be the book that it was, but I'm going to keep reading and I'll let you know how I go. Following on from that book, I'll be reading Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and following on from that book, I'm going to be buddy reading with my mum From Scratch by Tembi Locke while she reads Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So, gosh, excuse me. These are the books that I have been discussing that I've at least attempted, or if not read, this week, and these are the books I'm carrying on into next week. Have you read any of these books? If you have, what did you think of them? Comment below and let me know, but please do be mindful of not leaving spoilers in the comment section because we don't want to spoil it for others. If you want to discuss any of the books you have read that I have also read with me in a spoilery way, I always leave my email in the description below, so you can certainly email me and spoil away over there. But in the meantime, I'm going to let you guys go. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Mwah. Thank you so much for watching. I post videos every Thursday and Sunday with reviews and other videos in between, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye guys. Bye.